everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of 5th of June 2024. The first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Councillor Hackwell.
Yes, I'm substituting for Councillor Filmer tonight.
Councillor Brown.
I'm substituting for Councillor Hamilton, please.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I'm substituting for Councillor Maritime.
Thank you. Item 2, to approve the record of the meeting held on 8th of May 2024. Is this approved? We will now move on to item 3 of the agenda, urgent matters by reason of special circumstances. I can confirm that there aren't any late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interest or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you very much. My usual one in terms of attending parish council meetings, and I do not attend the planning meetings or make any comments on it. So that's the first thing. The second one is on agenda item 7. I know the applicant, who is the chemist in Bryant Road in Strood. I know him, his wife and his family fairly well, and therefore I think it totally inappropriate that I sit here and make any decisions on that application this evening, so I shall be withdrawing from that application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Golvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. An OSI item 9, I'd feel far, as it's a member of the Conservative group, I'd feel far more comfortable not being present in the room, so I will leave for that item.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hackwell.
The same item, item 9, the applicant is a Conservative councillor in our association, so I'll be leaving the room as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Brown.
I sit on the Lower Medway IDB, and they have made a comment, but I've not been party to any comments or anything to do with planning. Therefore, I'm just declaring it as an ODI.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No. Okay, before moving on to the main part of the agenda, Councillor Williams has asked to speak as ward member on agenda item 7. Is this agreed by members of the committee? Thank you. Now moving on to item 5, planning application, land south of View Road. Peter Hockney, service manager, is going to present this application. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application site relates to land south of View Road in Cliffe Woods. You can see on the screen there the site outlined in red. It's to the south of View Road. As you can see, View Road running along there around the corner. To the west is the existing development of Englefield Crescent. To the east and the south of the site is a permission for 68 residential dwellings that was secured under Planning Permission 21/1694. Details of that are in the agenda. And then to the southeast here is the Chatham Woods and Lodge Hill site of special scientific interest. So it's the triple SI, which you'll see referred to during the report, and also area of ancient woodland. In terms of some of the views of the site, these are views from the west, looking down towards the properties beyond the application site, which are located over here. Again, this is looking from the corner of the site closest to the triple SI, looking back towards View Road. This is a view from the western end of View Road, looking east towards the site. And again, looking down View Road again towards the site. The dotted line here is approximately where the entrance would be to the site. And another view looking towards the site from View Road. This photograph is taken from the existing development of Englefield Crescent towards the site. The approximate extent of the site is that dotted line at the top. But you can see from here the difference in land levels, in that the existing development is quite significantly higher than the application site. And we'll have some cross sections later on in the presentation which outline that in terms of the proposal. Here is one of the longer distance views, again with the site in its context, and the aerial image of the application site. So again, outlined in red, the triple SI area in here, and these two fields are the fields that have the existing residential consent that has been granted on them. The site itself received planning permission for 50 retirement dwellings, originally on appeal under a 2016 reference number. More recently, planning permission has been granted for 50 retirement homes, comprising 42 apartments and 8 bungalows. And this is the consented scheme that was under that 2022 reference, and you can see how the general site was laid out with View Road coming around here to the north of the site, and as I say, majority of the units within apartment blocks with a number of bungalows, so I think 8 in total. And on this eastern side, you can see the Englefield Crescent properties with their rear gardens coming to the site boundary. These are some visuals of the previous permission to show the character of the bungalows, and again the permitted apartments. So the apartments were of a fair scale, I think is safe to say, and again you can see in terms of the layout their distribution throughout the site. Now the proposal for consideration tonight is an alternative to the previous permission, and it would be for 25 age-restricted dwellings. 13 of those would be 2-bed bungalows, 8 would be 3-bed chalet bungalows, and 4 would be 3-bed houses. And so you can see the spread of the development. It's a much looser development in comparison to those quite dense apartment blocks that were previously consented through the site. Again, here you can see the backs of the properties for Englefield Crescent, and the properties that you can see here are those that are the consented properties on the other two fields. So those have planning permission. As set out in the report, the principle of the development, the loss of agricultural land, the visual impact are all sort of very similar in conclusions to both the previous permission on the site and indeed the inspector's decision on the 2016 consent. And they were deemed to be acceptable, and as I say, similar conclusions can be drawn on this development on those range of issues. You can see from this layout that the proposal would result in a low density and low rise development, which we consider is appropriate in this sort of rural edge location. The closest dwellings to Englefield Crescent are about between 11 and 15 metres from the boundary. And this, plus the fact that the dwellings down here are single storey in height, ensures that the amenity of these properties and their occupiers is maintained. That will be illustrated again a bit later on with the cross-section for members' illustration. This layout essentially puts the proposal that we're currently considering in the context of the wider approved scheme. So you can see the development site is that essentially runs down from that pedestrian access and then along this line and then back up there. So that's the sort of proposal site that you're currently considering. One of the key considerations in this is the impact on the SSSI and you'll see from the papers the associated objection from Natural England. As I say, this is where the SSSI boundary is located. There's extensive information within the report about this issue. And again, previously, the inspector allowed the original scheme on this site in 2016 with a no cat clause or no, as a condition in order to protect the species within the SSSI. This was replicated through the adjacent housing site and indeed the 2022 permission on this site. You can see from the wider layout here, the buffer between the SSSI and the proposed development is quite extensive. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's ancient woodland, and there's a footpath that runs in this location here where the yellow arrow is. And the distance between that footpath and the boundary is a 22-metre buffer. And obviously that increases to the flank of the dwelling and indeed the private garden areas. This is comparable, as you can see, to the consented housing scheme on the part of the site to the south. And again, you can see that the rear gardens of the properties at Englefield Crescent, which back directly onto the SSSI and don't have such conditions or restrictions in terms of the protection. So on that basis, we consider that the impact on the SSSI is acceptable and is consistent with the previous consents on the site and how particularly the inspector dealt with that at the previous appeal. In terms of the Section 106 contributions, they're all set out as in the papers and are proposed to be paid as requested. There's slight adjustments in terms of the education contribution due to the fact that we're not, because they're age-restricted properties, there won't be essentially school-aged children on site. The minimum age of dependents would be 16. So they're paying towards sixth form elements, and similarly there's a reduced open space contribution because of the lack of any additional demand on play equipment due to the fact there's not children of that age on the site. So just to run through the proposals in terms of their design, here are the the lifestyle house type, which is the houses. So you've got that one. You've got one with the sort of black weatherboarding as part of it, again with the floor plans. These are the chalet bungalows. You can see the sort of dormer detailing and the modest dormers as part of that to reflect the sort of rural character with the steeply pitched roofs. And then these are the bungalows which form the majority of the development. And as I say, you can see the sort of low-rise nature of that development, and thus the low amount of impact on the neighbouring properties. There's an elevation of the garage. Here, as I mentioned earlier, is a cross-section showing the relationship between the properties at Englefield Crescent and the proposal site. Unfortunately, the sort of lower cross-section is flipped, but as I say, the Englefield Crescent properties are on this side at the higher ground level, and then you'll have the sort of lower bungalows further down. And you can see with the single-storey nature, the distance between the properties, the boundary treatments that would exist, and indeed the boundary planting. There'll be no impact on the residential amenity of occupiers that would result in any harm. So the recommendation that we've got before you today is that, subject to notification of Natural England of the intention to approve the application, and subject to the completion of the Section 106, that we recommend that approval be granted, subject to the conditions on the papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I now open the floor to members. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you very much. I am quoted in the local press as stating that the original application didn't look much different to an Eastern European gulag. And when the second application came in, my comment was then, yeah, it's now reduced to a stalag with the removal of the watchtower and barbed wire. So this application, although semi-approved, is absolutely a delight to see. However, as a councillor sitting on a planning committee, I feel that every single member who sat on that planning committee at the time failed miserably in its task. Because when this went to appeal, we could have stopped it, but we relied too much on officers to provide us with the answers why it should go to appeal, because the due diligence that all of us didn't apply allowed this to occur. So if we looked at the MPF, it says quite clearly the desirability of a new development making a positive contribution to local character and distinctives. Well, this certainly doesn't. We also look at the flood risk and vulnerability classification, and quite clearly on page 34 of this report, there's it says it be advisable to have a condition, and I don't see any condition there as recommended. Continuing on the MPPF, it says the fundamental aim of the Green Belt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. The essential characteristics of green belts are their openness and their permanence. To check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns and villages, to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. None of that was done. It says it's also necessary to restrict development of the village primarily because of the important contribution which the open character of the village makes to the openness of the green belt, and the village should be included. It also talks about protected sites and impact zones. We've all heard an impact zone here and it's in its site. But the NPPF and SSI recommends a minimum of 500 metres up to 1 mile for a protected site. Habitats and biodiversity. To protect and enhance the biodiversity and geodiversity, plans should identify, map and safeguard components of local wildlife-rich habitats and wild ecological networks. Not done. We never took into account the hierarchy of international health and local designated sites of importance of biodiversity. Not done. Wildlife corridors and stepping stones that connect them, and areas identified by national and local partnerships for habitat management. Not done. Enhancement, restoration, and the promotion of conservation, restoration, and enhancement of priority habitats. Not done. Ecological networks and the protection and recovery of priority species, and identify and pursue opportunities for securing measurable net gains for biodiversity. Not done. When determining planning applications, local planning authorities should apply the following principles. If significant harm to biodiversity resulting from a development cannot be avoided, with less harmful impacts adequately mitigated or as a last resort compensated for, then planning permission should be refused. Not done. Development on land within or outside site of special scientific interest, which is likely to have an adverse effect. Not done. And I continue, the following should be given the protection as habitat sites, potential scientific protection areas and possible special areas of conservation. Not done. And I am as guilty as every other member on that planning committee, because I wasn't diligent enough to look all this up and make sure it came before the planning committee and the officers. So now I look at this report in front of me, and what do I see? Straight away, S106 payments. Now, it's been agreed so many times with this planning committee and the officers, if there is an issue with 106 payments being possibly confrontational with the aspects of 106, i.e. is there to enhance and protect the areas that are being affected. Giving money to Strood does not affect the people in Cliffe Woods. So that 106 money is absolutely a joke because it should not be going to Strood, it should be residing within Cliffe Woods. I've already mentioned about the Lower Medway Drainage Board with their recommendation coming in. And we've also heard from the report that this is age restricted. Age restricted to whom? A 3-bedroom bungalow. So one of the people in there must be 50 or above. Doesn't take into account his younger partner, their children and anybody else. So that too is a fallacy. Now, of course, we can't vote against this tonight because it's already been approved. But unless those conditions are met, which I've already mentioned, for the scheme for full service water disposal and the change for the 106 payment to be made to the people of Cliffe and not Strood, then I will not be voting for this application. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, this is an interesting one because the local planning authority has come a long way with regards to the Lodge Hill SSI, from originally wanting to build 5,000 homes, well, promoting 5,000 homes on the bird sanctuary, to what we understood was a emerging policy for 150-metre buffer against the boundary, and another change to that policy to what we now believe is 400 metres to a Nightingale territory that's been evidenced with a survey, which this application would comply with, because although it's along the boundary, the nearest territory which has been proven to exist from the 2012 survey is over 500 metres away. And that was pretty much the basis of when the two applications on Lodge Hill Lane went to appeal. That was the basis of our argument between the two applications. So I get that point. I get the argument that the local planning authority is putting across and trying to be consistent, especially with regards to what's happened on this site with what's been approved and what's been won on appeal. So other than that, the only issue I've got is because we still have the Natural England, Kent Wildlife Trust, RSPB, and opposing or objecting to the application. KCC Biodiversity are saying that they still need additional information in terms of the impact. From a principled position, I can't support this because of those objections which still exist. Thank you.
Councillor Field. Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to come in on the section 106, and there's mainly clarification from the officers, but I was a little bit surprised at Councillor Etheridge's comments. Surely people travel from Cliffe into Strood Town Centre and would want to see Strood Town Centre shopping area, etc., in as good a state as possible. But notwithstanding that, there's a contribution towards a mobile library visit in the vicinity of the site. There's another contribution related to Who Sports Centre. So I would have thought that the section 106 was drawn up both from the point of view of immediate local interest and local interest in general. From that point of view, Chair, subject to clarification from the officers, I'm a bit puzzled about the contribution which has been made. Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Jones has put it very well, to be honest. In terms of the financial contributions, I think the matter that Councillor Etheridge was concerned about was the first element, which talks about public realm improvements to the civic space and gateway to Strood Town Centre. But as has been pointed out, there's other significant contributions that would be within the vicinity, and indeed, as Roman numeral 8, it seeks to secure just over 31,000 towards improving open space provision within the vicinity in consultation with the parish council. So it's looking at that package of section 106 in order to deal with the mitigation from this additional demand and essentially securing those contributions where indeed they're necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is certainly a great improvement on the earlier applications we've had, so that's very much a plus. I also think it will help across Medway to have designated accommodation for people to downsize. We all know in our own wards there are umpteen large houses with only one or sometimes only one or two people there. So even though there is a disincentive for people to do that with the capital gains tax, this I think could make a contribution providing more family type homes around the whole of Medway. The thing that worries me a little bit with this, whilst this is sort of designated for 55 years plus, like my colleague Councillor Etheridge, I just wonder how that will actually work out in reality. The other thing, whilst I welcome the amount of bungalows that are in this scheme, it's very good, but all over Medway, bungalows have a habit of then being transformed into houses. It's happening everywhere all the time. I would personally be happier with this if we removed the permitted development rights from these bungalows, so they could stay bungalows and stay as accommodation suitable for elderly people. Because otherwise, I think some of these will get lost in the future, which would be a great shame. So I think I'm happy with this, and I certainly will be voting to support it, but I'd be happier if there was some reassurance that these very necessary bungalows, which are very important for the demographics. There's more and more people now with mobility issues, getting old, who will need this type of accommodation, but practically every bungalow in Medway is under threat of being turned into a house, and I think we need to somehow put a stop to that. Thank you.
Over to you, Dave.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Condition 24, I agree with you entirely, Councillor Galvin. which is why we've got condition 24, which removes those permitted development rights so we can make sure they remain as bungalows. Because you're absolutely right in terms of what is the essence of this proposal. When we talk to people in Cliffe and Cliffe Woods about why we have over 55s living in large family accommodations, part of it is they want somewhere of quality to live, somewhere of appropriate downsizing, but they also want to remain in the village that they've lived in for a while, their family grown up with, maybe their kids still live elsewhere in the village. And this helps us to address that point, and quite rightly, your point about removing permitted development rights is spot on, because then we can be assured that it will remain as a bungalow for people who need bungalows and not become a house for general family accommodation. That ruins the what we're trying to aspire to here. Just want to come back though on some certain ecological points. Respecting Councillor Etheridge, as I always do, all the points, and I mean that, sorry, that I wasn't meant flippantly at all. All the points that he has raised were carefully considered by the Planning Authority last time, both by officers and by members, but also by the inspector in considering the appeal. The inspector's not only got to look at the officers' reports, the appeal statements, but also must come to a view on the national planning policy as well as local plans themselves. So they must come to their own view on that. So in this occasion, I disagree with Councillor Etheridge about that point. In terms of the ecology point, I think Councillor Pearce has summed things up pretty well in relation to that buffer zone and the difference between this scheme and that one which was quite rightly dismissed on appeal at Lodge Hill. Natural England have maintained their objections on this. With the scheme adjacent to this site, we took further ecological advice in relation to the protection of the triple SI. And the conditions that were recommended on the adjacent site and replicated on here bring in those measures to give that protection to that adjacent triple SI with the fencing, with the landscaping, the policy and other measures as well, but also a management. And what that management condition allows us to do is, if it isn't achieving our objectives, then we, in reviewing that management, we could get further measures to achieve that. We're confident, though, that on this site, those measures would be acceptable. And that was the advice of our ecologist that we appointed specifically to look at that adjacent site. And in relation to KCC ecology, I'm satisfied that the landscape and ecology conditions recommended here, along with the biodiversity gains that actually will be on this site, sufficiently address that and will enable further information to be provided, which we will consult with our KCC ecology on. Hopefully that's helpful, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was also part of the planning committee that approved the scheme that we got, and that was a better scheme than the other iterations that we saw at several planning meetings, and we ended up with approving the one that got planning removal. Now, this scheme is immeasurably better than the scheme that we approved. I think it looks a lot better, and as Councillor Goldman has already said, we sadly lack bungalows in Medway, and building these new bungalows is really welcome. I do have some concerns about the construction in the way that 4 of the properties have got access from the adjacent site. I haven't been out to the site recently, so I don't know whether that site's already under construction and how that will be phased in together so they are coordinated together, because we don't want 20 of these being built and then have to come back 3 years later just to finish the other ones off. So I'd like to explore that. And what I'm going to call the first home schemes for the elderly, which is the 6 properties that we're going to discount for. How are we going to set the criteria for that? You know, can people just decide to buy that instead of releasing equity? You know, I just don't understand how that scheme's going to work, how it gets policed in the future, and who manages that in the future. I mean, the estate agents aren't going to manage that. So because it's not a first homes policy, you don't have to be a first time buyer to actually buy these houses. In fact, it's been encouraged for people who are not first time buyers to buy these. So I would like some further explanation of and thoughts of how that's going to work and who's going to manage it. Even though we approved the last application with a no cats policy, I still do not understand how that's going to be enforced. And we all know about how high that will be up on the enforcement list to deal with if someone has got a cat in these bungalows, which older people tend to have pets as company. So it's going to be interesting to see how the proposal is to do that scheme. But I think overall, I think this is a far better scheme than the one we have approved, and I would prefer this one to be built than the one that's already approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. It's only a quick point of clarity, really, for Dave or Peter. It's just around the young people point that Councillor Etheridge brought up. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure, is it a planning total planning consideration or not around the ages? Because you could possibly have young people, like Councillor Etheridge has said, you may have older people that have adopted or fostered or actually end up with their grandchildren because of certain circumstances. So it's around that element. And if so, if there is no way of managing that, the amenities are not acceptable, are they, for... I know you said, Peter, around the 16-year-old, you average the age, but it's just a point of clarity. You can't police. I know we're not having cats on site, but you can't police the ages of the children. So I don't think we've had that question answered properly. And just for clarity, I'd really appreciate if we could.
Thank you. In terms of the condition 28 sets out the restrictions of the properties, and it does restrict that to a person aged 55 or older with their spouse, partner or companion as appropriate, or dependents, providing the dependents are 16 years or over. Now, that's not a wholly unusual condition for older persons accommodation or retirement accommodation. It's one that has been adapted from conditions that inspectors have put on appeal decisions. It looks at the reasonableness of that, and indeed the circumstances of individuals who will be looking to purchase these properties will know that from the very beginning in terms of what they need to do in order to comply with the condition. I think furthermore the size of the properties are such that they wouldn't lend themselves to occupation by larger families with a number of dependents, particularly children in that regard. So there's sort of that two-stage element. There's the sort of restrictive element of the condition and the fact that it's there in black and white, and then there's the sort of other restriction in terms of the general design of the properties. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. I mean, again, thanks for that, Peter. And I will agree with Councillor Atwood, this is much better than what we had originally. But I suppose I'm just trying to get my head around the clarity point around the amenities, because there is nothing to stop the spouses, as Councillor Everett said, being younger or actually bringing young children to home. And if that isn't something that we need to consider, then I take that on board, Dave, and after years I should know that. But it's just, we don't know, do we, how many, you know, you've said the person has to be 55 or over, but their spouses or their partners do not have to be. and they could bring children with them. And I'm not anti-children, let me get that clear. However, I suppose I worry that if it did increase, or if there were families into those, and we do know people are squeezing quite large families into smaller places, would the amenities be there for younger people if that should happen? Where would we go with that, Peter?
Thank you. I think in terms of the, as you say, I think if there a companion or a spouse partner comes and they have children there, then in terms of the condition, it restricts all dependents to 16 or over. So that would, want of a better word, bite on those occupants as well. So that anyone residing in the house as their main residence would have to comply with that condition, particularly in terms of the dependent element being 16 or over. And that's obviously there to, and as I say, that in terms of the proposal itself is put forward on that regard. We're looking at the contributions not including, for example, primary school and secondary school education, because there won't be any under 16s there, and similarly the play equipment contribution wouldn't be paid because again the fact that there would be no resident children there. That wouldn't stop grandparents sort of having children overnight to stay, or indeed for a short break during the holidays. It would only be those that have the property as a permanent residence.
Thank you, Chair, and it is only the last bit, one last bit. Thank you so much for that, Peter. I think my only comment might be then is to strengthen that condition, making it a bit more clear around dependent or who's living in the house, maybe. I mean, if you feel it's clear enough, but to me it wasn't clear when I read it. But you've made it, you've clarified it for me.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, for letting me come back in. Just on the affordable housing situation, ideally I'd like to see obviously the 80% of the open market value properties a first priority given to residents of Cliffe Woods. I remember when Trentport came forward with their proposals, and one of the Section 106s they were proposing, I think in their consultation document, was that there would be a priority for local residents, which I think would be a good standard to have across the board with all applications. I think it depends on how you really define local, because in terms of the affordable housing criteria, the word local might mean anyone in the Medway towns. But I think when it comes to these rural communities, we do need to define a local resident as someone who lives in that village. And if that can be a standard condition across the board, I think that will do two things. It will firstly address particularly rural housing need, which there might be a bigger need for in terms of affordability, but also it might even reduce contention with development as well. So if that's an emerging policy position from the local planning authority, I think that would be well supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peake.
Well, this is not the reason why I put my hand up. Following on Councillor Pearce's comment about only to be sold for people from the village, to me, this smacks of Big Brother looking into other people's business. I mean, what happens if you've got somebody you say grew up there, left, came back? Do they or do they not qualify? Is it going to be, oh, I lived there for 15 years and I've gone away for 5 years, I no longer qualify? I mean, how does this work? Following on from Dan's concern, I do what I like to call a reality check. 20 years down the line, when, all the controversy is potentially gone, there's a private transaction taking place. Somebody sells their properties to somebody else. Again, nobody else's business. Is it really going to be a monitoring that that property will not go to younger people? I do agree with what Councillor Galvin's emphasis on keeping them to bungalows, because obviously that does tend to attract the older generation, but there's no guarantee in that. So I'm just wondering what can happen in the future. Is it genuinely that we're going to take an interest even? Because, resources are tight. The reason why I put my hand up, by the way, was on page 35, the Kent Wildlife Trust. where they say, I just want feedback on your opinion on what they say, to quote, they consider that the proposed mitigation measures that have been put forward by the applicants are unenforceable, likely to be ineffective, difficult to monitor and untested. Thank you.
Dave, do you want to come back on that?
Chairman, thank you very much. I would like to come back on a few points, if that's okay, Chairperson. I think firstly, in relation to Councillor Hackwell's question, which was about having the development continuing through, and I think that's a good one. And I think the fact that this site's now been purchased by the same developer as the adjacent site, and it's an SME who need to get on and build to have that. I'm trying to think of the right word, but that the turnover, and that's what SMEs do. They get on, they build, and they get off, and they move on to the next site. They have to. They're not like the volume house builders. And so the fact that this is in the same ownership, their intention is to do exactly your point there. You asked a question about no cap policy. If that's all we were recommending, I think that's a very valid point. It's very difficult to enforce that. But that's not all that we're recommending. And that picks up Councillor Peake's question, which is about the mitigation here. We've done the survey of that adjacent land has been done. And as Councillor Pearce points out, there are no nightingales within 500 metres of this. We have the fencing proposed, and we're working with the applicants in terms of what would be an appropriate fencing to go along there, which would stop cats going through there. So you have the mesh fencing, and then you have a cantilever like that, so they can't just get up the fence and get over the top. You've got that cantilever. Then we've got the landscaping as well, which will be a very dense, thorny landscape to stop cats going through there, and that's existing cats that maybe at the moment come from View Road across the site to get to the triple SI, because cats roam. That would help to discourage existing cats as well. Then the layout you'll see is in terms of this footpath, so it's encouraging people walking their dogs or whatever not to go towards that path, but the boundary, but to follow the footpath around. So it's giving them an option, somewhere to go. There will also be information boards explaining the importance of the triple SI as well. And as far as it being untested, well, everything is untested at some point in time. And the condition here enables us to try it out. If it doesn't achieve the objectives, there is more that we could do on this site, which is different from the Lodge Hill one, where our ecologist was saying, well, if that doesn't work, there's nothing else you can do. In this case here, we can extend the fencing, we can bring in different fencing, we can bring in different planting. There are measures that we can do here to help mitigate, and they will provide the testing for future sites as well. So the final thing, and it's picking up the concern that has been expressed here regarding occupation. If members are not satisfied that the condition just in itself is sufficient, then we can do a belt and braces and include it in the section 106 as well. So you've got the condition in the section 106. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond-Eshay.
No, thank you very much. I was not on the planning committee when this one first came round, and I must say I quite like this setup for quite a few reasons. First and foremost, as somebody that's worked with older people, having a place you could go to with dignity that allows you to remain viable. And I like the fact that we have a setup here that has mixed 2 to 3 bedroom bungalows. So people who move there, yes, they're downsizing, they might be constricting, but they're still very much viable. So that allows them to have family over and stuff like that, which is very, very important to combat things such as loneliness. It's so, so important. I've got 2 real questions here, though, in terms of they'll be talking about bungalows a lot in the media as the preferred choice, and I get that. But I want some data to really back up as to why. Apparently, bungalows make up 8.5% of new properties coming to the market within the UK. So I want to know within Medway how many bungalows are coming to the market, and how much would this setup here make a positive impact to those figures. And the second one is all to do about energy savings. Bungalows are known to be more energy efficient. If so, how much more efficient are these bungalows compared to what was going to be there originally? Because that would be a good way of incentivizing people to downsize to these properties if they can evidence that these bungalows are actually far more efficient, far more environmentally friendly than the house setup. Thanks.
Dave, yeah, to you.
Thanks, Chair. I think in relation to bungalows, I mean, a number of things there. I think, firstly, having worked in planning in Medway for an awful long time, I don't think we've kept up with the demand for bungalows. And I think Councillor Galvin has reminded me of this many times over the last decades on this. Because not only have we not seen enough bungalows coming forward within schemes, but we've also seen bungalows lost. As Councillor Galvin has talked about, where we haven't had conditions which stop permitted development right, we've seen them converted to chalet bungalows, and then they're not appropriate for certain people who have mobility issues. What the applicant has also done here and elsewhere in Cliffe Woods is they've spoken to local community, and the local community has said to them, we would like to see some bungalows on your schemes. They've delivered that just up the road off Town Road. They're looking to deliver these here, which also links into that over 55s aspect. And then, as you quite rightly point out, Councillor Hammondish, we're an increasingly elderly population, generally in the country and in Medway, and this is going to help towards meeting that demand. The final thing, Chair, picking up the question that Councillor Pearce rightly asked, which is about that local need, and it is something we're working on in relation to the local plan, and indeed in relation to first homes, as to whether we can have a criteria within our affordable homes which enables them to be marketed first to local people, and then if they're not taken up, then they have that cascade going down to Medway people after that. So that cascade is something we're working on as part of the local plan. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me come back. And that my question has already been partially answered by Dave, in the fact that the officer has made repeated comments about local people downsizing to a local area which they know. And I think it's quite feasible, and rightly so, that local people, i.e. the Cliffe Woods area, be given priority first. And I agree with Councillor Pearce on that. So that's my only comment. And as I say, that's all. My question has been partially answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, I have a couple of questions. I'm not going to debate what local is, as I'm not local, but I came here and I've served this community for a long time. So at the moment, my questions really are more around the flood risk on this site, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what mitigations are being proposed on that, because as far as I know, if we approve this tonight, it still means that it goes to the Secretary of State prior to issuing a decision on that. Am I right or am I wrong? Oh, it's on the other one. Yeah. But is there any worry about flooding on this particular site? Because it's right next to land that previously wasn't built on. I'm not suggesting there is. It's just a question.
Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the sort of flood risk, there aren't any significant flood risk elements to this scheme. There is a condition 13, which deals with drainage. As Mr. Harris mentioned earlier, the site before members tonight is now also or owned by the same house builder that owns the two elements that surround the site as well. So they'll be looking at a sort of comprehensive drainage scheme to deal with essentially the three portions within one. So the sustainable urban drainage system would deal with all items of each site essentially. So, and that will all be wrapped up within the conditions for those applications. Thank you.
Are you saying that the same condition about that will be on all three sites? I think that's what you're saying, but maybe I misheard that.
So the condition for this site is condition 13 on these papers. I haven't got the decision notices of the others, but I would strongly suggest that there would also be drainage conditions on those permissions as well. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, I still haven't heard how you're going to manage the eligibility criteria for the first homes for the elderly and how you manage that going forward. So the discount scheme, what's the eligibility criteria? Are they over 55 and haven't got X in the bank, or how's it going to be managed to get to qualify for your discounted homes?
Peter, did you want to come back on that?
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of discounted market value properties, they are a form of affordable housing. Now that's set out in the annex to glossary of the MPPF, and we'll have to essentially comply with those elements. The proposal includes that within the Section 106 agreement, so that's the sort of legal tie essentially to the provision in terms of that discounted element. So that's the enforcement mechanism essentially, the 106 agreement, the legal agreement that then ties this development to the purchasers.
Did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, but I still don't understand. I understand first homes, you're a first-time buyer, you've never had a mortgage before, you know, it can all be legally checked. How are we going to manage the criteria for elderly people or people over the age of 55 to get discounted homes? You know, what is the criteria? That's what I'm trying to get to. Is it that they're on, I don't know, they've just only got an income of a pension, or you know, what is the criteria that makes them eligible for those homes?
Dave, did you want to come back on that, or Peter?
In terms of the definition within the MPPF, it says the eligibility is determined with regard to local incomes and local house prices. Provisions should be in place to ensure the housing remains at discount for future eligible households, and those elements will be written into the Section 106. Now, obviously, we wouldn't have every clause in the 106 as part of the recommendation, because that would be sort of an unmanageable recommendation. But through discussions with legal officers as part of those Section 106 negotiations, that will be where the detail falls into those clauses of the final 106. Thank you.
Chair, I think I totally understand the point that Councillor Hackwell is making, and he completely understands where first homes are coming. Completely understands that, but he's saying, well, you know, how will discounted over 55 homes be managed? As Peter says, it will be within the section 106, but it will be taking people off the. It will relate to affordable homes, so it will be affordable homes effectively, but for people over 55s. So the same criteria that we normally apply for affordable homes will be applied on this through the Section 106. Is that helpful? Sorry, obviously not.
I thought this was a development for downsizing, or resizing, which means that those people are probably like to be already in a home of some sort. Why would they need to be on the affordable homes list?
This is only 6 of the properties. Not,
Okay. Councillor Hammond-Eshay.
Okay, thank you. It's just over to Councillor Pearce for some clarity, and maybe Councillor Govin. You made the assertion that you would want local residents to have first dibs at these properties. Can you just be clear? If somebody is downsizing, they already have a home, are you going to stipulate that that person can only sell their home in Cliffwoods to somebody in Cliffwoods, so that they can therefore have first dibs for these properties in Cliffwood? Or are you actually meaning you can sell your property in Cliffwood to anybody you like? It's an open market. But then when it comes to these properties available in Cliffwood, you then have first dibs. I just want that clarified, please.
Councillor Anang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think from reading through the document, when it comes to the section 106, like on page 59, section 6, it talks about 8,13725 towards the development of a gender-neutral changing area, including improved shower facilities with increased accessibility for families, schools, and disability users. But reading through the report, when it comes to parking, it's talking about having about, I think, 7 parking spaces or about parking spaces. It never talks about any disability parking. And within the building itself, I've not seen anything about disability. And if it's a building that is being proposed for people from 55 and above, which means it's for older people, I think there should be disability access for that age. But reading through, I think there is nothing about disability parking or access for disability people. It's rather talking about giving section 106 to the facilities at Sports Center, having those disability facilities, but not relating to the structure or the building itself, which relates to people of age 55. And we shouldn't think that because it's a bungalow, then definitely it should be disability accessible. It can be a bungalow, but still it might not be disability accessible. So have we thought about that?
Peter, do you want to come back on that?
My microphone doesn't want me to. Yeah, in terms of that, the parking element, because the properties, as you can see from the layout there, have on-plot parking. So in terms of that element, rather than as members will be used to seeing with a number of sort of flatted developments, or indeed the apartments that were previously consented on this scheme, you'd be looking at communal parking areas, at which point you would also look at those that are disability accessible parking spaces. With these properties and on-plot parking as laid out there, that's essentially the set there. So you wouldn't be looking at those wider, essentially parking blocks that would require those elements. In terms of the dwellings themselves, I think as you sort of alluded to, it's often the case that bungalows are either to the standards required or at least adaptable to those standards. In this case, I haven't got the information in front of me as to whether indeed the internal design of those are adaptable, but it's certainly something we could put an informative on to encourage the applicant to look at those, particularly the adaptable elements, to incorporate those within the final internal layout and design.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, for letting me come in. Just to explain on what's been raised. So my understanding is you can only put conditions or criteria on the proposed development in question. So the scenario would be that someone with a Cliffe Woods address would move out of their property, probably a family home, and would then move into one of these units. That family home would then go onto the market and free for anyone to purchase, which would free up housing. So it's a win-win in that respect. And I don't think that's a controversial position, as the local planning authority, as the Chief Planning Officer has said. The local planning authority is looking at a criteria and how that scales down as it goes through the process. It's not a controversial view, I don't think, because in a lot of rural communities, there is an affordability issue, specifically for rural communities, because the house prices are higher than those that are in the towns. So I don't think it's a controversial view, and as the Chief Planning Officer has said, they are actually looking into doing something on that. Thank you.
Councillor Golvin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hatwell's actually jogged my memory, because this did come up as sort of a price eligibility many years ago on the old Rochester upon Medway Council, when we had two housing associations, not too far from each other. One was Salton Road up in Lordswood, and the other one is Dove Close, which is now Prince's Park, but it was part of Waterslade. And I distinctly remember to get eligibility for both those schemes, there was a set house price of that people were going to sell. So that was then made it suitable for people who had a home, but it wasn't a home that was very expensive. So there was definitely, for both those schemes, there was a price, and I think to show how long ago, I think it was something like £20,000 or £25,000. So people had to have a property that wasn't more expensive than that limit. And then I think as with the first homes, I think then there's a clause put on the land registry. So when the house comes for sale, that flags up to the solicitor or whoever that house has to be sold at a discounted rate. So we have done it before, so I can't see really there is too much difficulty in making that condition. Obviously, it'll have to be reviewed nearer the time when the houses are built to get the current house prices to set that de minimis.
Thank you. So we're saying that we want to put a condition on that it's for the local people, first of all. I mean, personally, I think it's quite important, because when you get elderly, you want to stay in the same area that you are with what you know. So I'd like that as a condition put on.
Chair, I think we could only really do that in relation to the 6 units which are covered under Section 106.
Yeah, the 6 units, yeah. Sorry, okay. That's what I meant. Sorry, Dave. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Right. Back to a few things. Firstly, the 106. I would expect that the 106 has probably been discussed by officers with this developer, and we can hopefully count on them not coming back in 3 months' time to reduce the 106. If you make it too onerous, we've seen this with Churchill in Raynham coming back when they were given 106 conditions, and they came back 3 months later and asked for them to be reduced, and they were reduced. So I'm hoping that the 106s that we put on sensibly will be honoured, and I suspect that will happen. because, as you said, that there is another site. The thing about affordability, I'm not terribly sure that we are the people who can actually decide what's affordable for whom. We have the most deprived wards in the country in Medway, some of the really, really badly deprived wards, and that might be somewhere that people who are more qualified than us to actually talk about affordability. And it's not on geographical basis necessarily that the affordability will come. It'll be coming from the people who need to buy these houses. And the real problem that we have in Medway is we've got a housing crisis, and it isn't just in Cliffe Woods, and it isn't just on the peninsula, it's across Medway. So I think that the 6 affordable homes is a good thing in this, and it's a standard thing. But actually, is it for this planning committee to decide who gets those homes? I think I was told previously it's not a planning condition that, or a planning consideration that we can say who those homes go to. I'd like some clarification maybe later about that, but as far as I know, that is not something that we can decide on here.
Dave, do you want to come back on that?
Chair, thank you very much. The legal officer who's bending down might want to comment on this. It is something we're working on, as I was explaining earlier. That local needs, because we do have an affordable homes problem in Medway. You're absolutely right, Councillor Brown, and there are affordable issues on the peninsula, in the villages. One of the concerns that I get expressed to me so often when I'm out talking about the local plan or planning applications out in the villages is them saying that they have concerns about new development, but that would be made more acceptable if some of the homes could be made available for the local people who are being priced out of their own village. In terms of their children and so on. But you're absolutely right also in terms of, we hear that about Medway and people taking affordable homes who come from outside the area. And this is something that we're looking to try and address through our work on our developer contributions guide, where we have a cascade. So it would, if we take the villages, then there would be initially looking at those first homes or whatever for people within the parish. And if they're not taken up within 6 months, then they can be marketed to Medway as a whole. So that's something that we're working through. It has been done elsewhere, but we're working through that. And then the cascade will then open it up. If it's still not taken up, then it will open up to others. I think in relation to this site, your question regarding not coming back and renegotiating Section 106 is a valid one generally that we're struggling with in terms of viability. In relation to this developer, and I can only say my experience of this developer, the only time they've ever come back to renegotiate a Section 106 was in relation to affordable homes, which this committee considered very recently, where they want to provide the affordable homes, but there wasn't an RP willing to take them through the Section 106. It was that discussion. But if they got grant funding, then they would do. And this committee agreed that with this developer, because they have a stake in Medway, they would agree to that relaxation. My recollection is that's the only time this developer has come back and tried to renegotiate Section 106. So hopefully those comments are helpful, Councillor Brown.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. And just following on from Councillor Brown, I suppose I just want to say I wholeheartedly support. I know your aspects around older people not wanting to travel far and wanting to still stay where they live. I support that. My only concern, though, today is that we're looking at a planning application here, and I know Dave and his team are working on a policy, are working on things in the future. We're not there yet. My worry is, Chair, is that if we set a precedent today around that, there could be areas like ours, like Gillingham, areas where there's not going to be any of these properties being built, where then people won't get the same opportunity. And that's my worry more. And I'm not going to take away the rural element, because I totally get that as well. Because if you're out there, you know, hopefully the procedure would still give them a bit of priority without it being set down. But I think if we on the hoof agree, it's up to the committee to do. If we on the hoof agree that we're going to give these 6 homes to just the people in Cliffe Woods, then it's going to have to be everything we do across the patch as well. It can't be just in Cliffe Woods. And that's my worry. Are we, you know, if we're going to go ahead with that tonight, that's great. But are we going to then set a precedent, Dave, for future developments, or those developments that will never be developments, like in areas of high intensity housing, like in Gillingham and Chatham and area? That's my only worry around that decision. I get it, though, that older people want to stay with their families, but it could be older people in Rainham that have got family in Cliffwood that want to move nearer to them as well. So I just don't want to restrict us, that's all, with regards to this application.
Councillor Pearce.
Thanks, Chairperson. I think it's we're having a good debate here on this issue, and I think there's strong arguments on both sides. I think when it comes to this issue about criteria, I think for the rural areas it will be a smaller catchment area, and I think for the more urban areas, this is just my view, I think for the more urban areas the catchment would have to be wider for that specific reason, that there'll be less development opportunities in those more urban, densely populated areas. So there will have to be a different circumstance, rural and urban. That's just my view on the situation. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Well, of course, people might want to retire to Cliffe Woods. That's entirely possible. In terms of the Section 106, Chair, I wasn't going to propose anything additional to what's here. I've already said it's a very comprehensive Section 106. I didn't, for example, mention the additional capacity in primary care premises as a result of the increase in housing when I last spoke, but for the benefit of the public who may be listening, I think that's a very useful contribution as well. And unless there's anything that the Chief Planning Officer thinks could be strengthened in terms of the Section 106 with regard to the age criteria, I was intending to propose the Section 106 just as listed on the report. Of course, obviously, it's open to members to put amendments if they want to.
Dave, did you want to come back?
Chair, thank you. And I know Councillor Hammondish wanted to come in on this. I think there are 2 questions here. The first is in relation to whether there needs to be an additional heading in the Section 106, which effectively, to all intents and purposes, replicates Condition 28 and gives a bit of belt and braces on that, makes it a little bit more enforceable. The second thing, which is the majority of the debate that's been going on, is whether that little a there in relation to the 6 units should have a local criteria, and whether that local criteria is parish of Cliffe initially and then out to Medway as wider after 6 months, or whether that local criteria is just purely Medway. That's a decision for the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Hammondish.
Thank you, and I don't really want to dwell on this. I know it's a far more complex debate to be had in terms of allocating properties. But one thing I would say is this. Let's think about degrees of separation. If you're born and raised in Cliffwood and you left Cliffwood, start a life somewhere else with the view to come back, you bought a house in Rainham, you downsize your property in Rainham so they can go back home to Cliffwood. How your scenario doesn't putting those factors in, that the mobilization of people, we move about all the time. And the counter argument is, you sell to anybody. You're okay to taking money from anybody to move into an area based upon willing seller, willing buyer principles. You're willing to take anybody to Cliffwood in, but they're going to have something subpar. And so actually all the good stuff, the new stuff, you have to have stayed here, not moved from here, to have first dibs. I just think there's a bias there. I think it does require a far more stringent focus group to just discuss an area out, because we could be setting a precedent here that is so, we could be creating it's a simple thing on the outside, but a very complicated problem. We could be making more issues for ourselves down the line. So I would rather we take it to another group to discuss, but not in this session here, because we don't have the data. We haven't modeled what this would like. We haven't explored all the various scenarios, as I've just alluded to one clear scenario. Somebody moves out, buys a house in Medway, Gillingham, and they cannot move back into Cliffwood. Or Gravesend, yeah.
Councillor Peake.
Can I just support that? The longer I think about this, the more concern I have. And as Councillor MacDonald said about setting a precedent on the hoof, yes, it's good to have this debate, but this, before you have a precedent, really needs to be thought through the consequences. So, for instance, if you have a stipulation that says for the first 6 months you can only sell to people just round the corner, or however it is done, what about somebody that is in an urgent need to move? For instance, dying relatives somewhere else, and they need to go there to give them support, but they've got to wait at least 6 months. Bear in mind, a lot of sales go through straight away, and they're going to wait 6 months before they can even open it up, and open up to what? Maybe a slightly more enhanced area. So there's going to be consequences to this. And not only that, but if this is allowed in one area, then I want to see it in other areas as well, in the name of equal opportunity, which is something I strongly believe in. You know, maybe there's other areas that should have this stipulation as well. How far do you take it? This needs further discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to say the points that members are making, that will all go into a policy which will eventually be created by the local planning authority, which might stipulate things like a few years if you've left the place, you might be able to reapply and that sort of thing. You know, all that can be covered in a policy. But with this, it's just a simple requirement that for the first 6 months, people that live in Cliffwood can apply, and if there's no uptake, it then can go to the wider Medway towns. I think that's a nice, simple policy which isn't convoluted and it can easily be enforced. But everything else that members have mentioned around, you know, if someone's moved out the area or moved back in, that can all be covered in a general policy, which I understand the local planning authority is working on at the moment with regards to the local plan. Thank you.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. I appreciate that this is, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that this has been a pretty long debate on one application, but I just felt that I just want to put my voice to affirm Councillor Jones' suggestion that we do not make an amendment to the Section 106 conditions. I'm very concerned about a potential condition around 6 months exclusivity. I do worry that that might entrench some sense of social segregation within the towns if it's not thought through in a suitable manner. I very much support affordable housing elements. We need more affordable homes, and this type of development, providing for this type of accommodation, is positive. But yeah, I just wanted to make that contribution as I haven't spoken yet.
Right, thank you. Councillor Hackwell.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Remember that we're only talking about putting this condition on the 6 affordable homes, not the others that anybody from Rain. We don't know what the criteria is for being eligible for those homes, so I don't think we should be putting any other criteria onto criteria that we don't already know.
Any other member? No. Okay, well, I'm quite happy. Listen to everybody's comments. I think it's only fair that we did it for the whole of Medway for the time being, and not people outside Medway. Is that agreed? Right, now hand over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the land south of View Road, Cliffe Woods, Rochester. Just checking my microphone is on, might be helpful. So the recommendation is approval subject to A, notify Natural England of the intention to approve, B, Section 106 agreement to secure the following, and I'm clearly not going to read all that out. I shall just say in accordance with the report as set out. Besides the comments which have been made in the most recent debate, the Chief Planning Officer did indicate earlier that it would be possible to replicate condition 28 in the Section 106s, and I think we should probably leave that in my proposal that I'm moving now, and then C, conditions 1 to 28 as set out in the report. And finally, if I can mention that officers said they would consider drafting an informative on accessibility adaptations in the bungalows. With all that, Chair, I so move.
Is that seconded?
Chair, before we move on and second that, we've still not taken into consideration the recommendation from the Drainage Board.
Yeah, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the comments from the Lower Medway Internal Drainage Board, just in terms of their last sentence, it says it would be prudent to condition a full scheme for surface water disposal based on SUD's principles, a maintenance schedule and construction surface water management plan. And that's what condition 13 that Councillor Brown referred to earlier was is to secure. Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry, is that seconded? Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I had proposed it because it was in conditions 1 to 28, just for clarity of the committee members. The Drainage Board was in conditions 1 to 28, which the officers confirmed they're conditions 13. So that was in what I'd originally proposed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. Is that seconded? Thank you. Those for?
That's 13, Chair.
Those against?
That's 2, Chair.
The application is approved. Item 6 of the agenda, planning application for City Wall Wine Bar. Mary Smith, Senior Planner, is going to present this application. So over to you, Mary.
Thank you. This is a retrospective application for the retention of a permanent outdoor shelter to the side of the building and for the use of the areas to the side and rear as part of the wine bar garden area. Originally, the application also included the retention of a gazebo to the front of the site, but this has now been removed. I think we all know where the City Wall Wine Bar is in Rochester High Street. I don't know how personally, but... So there's some recent history on this site. A previous shelter, which was much larger and with inappropriate materials, was refused permission and an enforcement notice was issued. It was then removed and replaced with alternative structures. So that's the picture of what it was like before. I think you can see on the bottom here, it's actually quite a large structure. The photos, you can see from the photos, but you can also see the extent of the structure there. And what is there now is smaller than that. So that's why I just wanted to highlight that bit to you. So this shows the site when the current application was submitted. The additional gazebos were of visual concern and have now been removed. So the application's been amended, and these have now been removed from both the application and from the site as well. You can see them from the street there. So you can see on here the reduced size. There'll be photos later which will help. The reduced size of the covered shelter now is just here, whereas we saw on that previous slide that it was actually much larger. This slide also shows the extent of the grounds that are part of the use that is that's subject to this application. So the blue area is the surfaced area, and the green area is the grassed area. And there's an enclosure and sort of gate between the two which can restrict access. The blue area is obviously closest to the high street, and this will be used, or is used, in general opening times, including in the evening. But the use of the green area is to be more restricted. It's obviously further from the high street, and would not be used in the evenings after 7 p.m, except on the busier days of the week, when the high street's generally busier, so that's Fridays and Saturdays, and on Sundays before Bank Holiday Mondays. This is considered to be an acceptable balance between the use of the premises and the impact on residential neighbours. The enclosure between the two and the bar security staff can control the use, and the quieter rear grassed area would only be used in the weekend evenings when the high street's busiest, and not in the mid and start of the week when the activity levels are lower. You've got the flats above these properties to the side. So this just shows the extent of the shelter as a sort of view of it. And then this is the sort of current site photos, and you can see the different areas. So you can see the shelter from the back, and then looking through the shelter to the rear part of the site, and then the rear part of the site has tables and chairs. And these are the areas to the side, so the grassed area is sort of behind there. Oh, sorry. And then just to finish, there's some photos from the high street. So you can see the gazebo, the sheltered area there, and it's much less prominent than the one that we saw before. Overall, it's considered that an acceptable position has now been reached, balancing the impact on the historic setting and local residents with the operation of the wine bar. So approval is recommended, and if agreed, this would also regularise the position on site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any members? Councillor Peake.
Sorry, please indulge me, because it's not strictly to do the application. Just out of curiosity, if this is approved, when there's a festival taking place, will they be able still to put out a gazebo around that area? And I must admit, at festival time, this is one of the destinations I aim for, with the lovely music and the lovely ambience there. So I'm just curious, please.
Yeah, Mary.
Yeah, it's all part of the garden, but there is a condition proposed which says that that no further permanent or temporary additions should be made on the site or fixed to the ground, because we are concerned there's obviously archaeology there, so anything fixed to the ground and the just sort of general sort of continuation of lots of different things onto the site has an impact on the historic centre.
I'm pleased, sorry, Chair, I'm pleased to hear that, but I just meant as a temporary, like they do for festivals. So you could argue that that doesn't necessarily matter because they'll be taking it back down again.
Yeah, Mary.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what the condition says. The condition talks about not having further permanent or temporary additions or changes other than the use of movable seating and tables and associated umbrellas that should not be fixed to the ground. So.
Councillor Hackwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick thing. I read in one of the objections that that it prevents compromises public ramp access to the land behind, which is to a sensory garden. How's that being mitigated so that the if it's true that it's being built, they're building a sensory garden, and we won't be able to get wheelchair access. Is that correct?
Mary? Do you want to come back on that?
Sorry. Yeah, the access is still available. There's access through, there's gates here, which is an access to that area, but there's also a gate here. And I think if we just look at the photos, you can see that the access there isn't affected. But if they wanted to put an alternative access into that back area, the site is the applicant's land, so they would need to sort of talk that through with them. But it doesn't block the access to that area, although the garden is still used, but the tables and chairs are movable there. So.
Thank you, Mary. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, my view on this application is that what's proposed is a lot smarter than what we've had before. And also, this structure they've built, it's not impossible to remove it in future. It could possibly even be described as a temporary structure. And also, as has been mentioned, there's obviously history with this site in terms of enforcement action, and condition 3 appears to give the local planning authority a bit more teeth because it's removed those permitted development rights, particularly with only suggesting that only movable seats really are going to be permitted in this area. So I think it is a good compromise position, and it will make sure that enforcement has got more teeth if anything was to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Anang.
Looking at the representation from Historic England has confirmed that they do not wish to offer any comments and suggestions. The view of the specialist conservation and archaeologist advisors are sought as relevant. If I may ask, have that been sorted with the relevant bodies? Because Rochester is an historical area, so with that, what was the advice from the archaeologists or any specialist conservation that was sorted?
Okay, Mary.
Yeah, we held a site meeting with the conservation officer, and he's happy with these proposals. In terms of archaeology, the county archaeologists didn't reply, but they're not really fixed into the ground, the structure, so it's not impacting on archaeology significantly at all. And as I say, the conservation officer is happy with the proposals. It's a good compromise.
Thank you. Any other member? Is that you, Councillor Brown? Yeah.
Just one very quick question. Some of the objections were about barbecues and smells and things like that. Presumably, we are only permitting people to sit or something under this. This isn't being constructed to allow additional activities such as cooking and barbecuing. Has that, or am I wrong in that?
Mary?
It's a pub use, so you know. But no, I think that a lot of the objections before related to the site, how the application was originally submitted. So if I go back to what it looked like originally, you had all the different structures. Obviously, the bit was used by the street engines, but there were different things there. So most of the objections related to how it was originally, and it's changed since then. We had a site meeting, and we weren't happy with a lot of the structures, and they've now been removed and taken away from both the site and the application.
Sorry, yeah, I can see from the drawings that it looks, and the pictures that it looks very different. What I'm asking is, if these were unacceptable activities under those conditions, have we managed to mitigate against these happening again? And is that something for licensing? Because at the moment, it looks like far better than it was, obviously. And you have talked about the conservation area and talking to conservation officers, excellent. But it's the use of the area that people are actually appear to be complaining about. And I wondered if there was any discussion about that. Or if it's outside the realm of this committee, is it supposed to come to licensing? That's all I need to know.
Mary, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is part of the wine bar garden, so it is the use of the garden as it is. But if you're talking about putting things in to have barbecues and etc., we already talked about condition 3 that talks about no further temporary or permanent additions. So if they put in physical things there to start cooking outside, then that would fall within that condition. Does that help? As much as we can, yeah.
Any other member? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mary. It's only two quick ones. One follow on from Councillor Brown, I suppose, with regarding the premises. There's just a confusion whether there should be a joint, whether it's planning and licensing here, because if it's now a full structure, you know, you're saying it is a pub garden area, but they do rent it out for people to do food and barbecues in that. So I was just, it may not be a planning consideration, but is there a discussion between you and licensing with regarding the use of that permanent, because it's going to be a permanent structure now. So from a licensing aspect, there's more seating area, there's more people, and it has to adhere to having the extra supervision, etc., etc. It's only don't worry, Mary, if you can't answer it right now, but I'm just wondering whether it has to come here and then licensing simultaneously.
I have to say we've been in touch with licensing to talk about what we're doing, but I don't know the exact details of what they need to do.
Thank you, Mary. Any other member? Also, Peter, did you want to come back? Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, just to, I think just to sort of be clear with the application, the proposal's in two aspects really. It's the structure in terms of the operational development to build that structure, but that is on the land which has always been part of the pub. So in terms of the use of that area, that could be used, I think as Mary was alluding to, for any purpose associated with the pub use. So whether that's someone cooking outside for a few hours, whether that's a band playing, that would all be something that a pub would typically undertake and would be outside of the realms of planning because it's part of the original planning unit. Now, in terms of the use element that we're looking at today, the use element looked purely at the green area to the rear, and that's the area that we're looking to restrict in terms of times for essentially use and operation in order to secure the amenity and really give people some certainty about when noise will occur. And it's striking that balance between the acceptable and anticipated noise that one would typically encounter living next door to a pub on a busy high street with a thriving nighttime economy, and one where they don't necessarily want lots of noise at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And that's the sort of balance that we've tried to strike with this application, and indeed with the applicant who, as you can see from the photographs, has been very cooperative in terms of our requests. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Okay, I've been out and looked at this site myself, and I'm quite sort of happy with the way it is. It does blend into the adjoining restaurant with the planters and the seating area. And it was brought up that the city wall was obscured, but in my opinion, that's minimal. So I will be supporting this application, and we'll now move over to Vice Chair Councillor Jones. Thank you.
And the Vice Chair has also passed the site recently, Chair, so I don't know what it says about the committee that the Chair and Vice Chair are keeping an eye on the Rochester High Street pubs. But in terms of the proposal in front of us, the City Wall Wine Bar, 120 to 122 High Street, Rochester, recommended to the committee approval with conditions 1 to 3 are set out in the report and summed up very well by the officer most recently speaking. I'd like to thank all the officers for the presentation as well. I so move, Chair. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those... Turn my microphone on.
That's 15, Chair.
Thank you. The application is approved. Before moving on to the next item, we're just going to take a short 5-minute break. Thank you. Item 7, planning application, Court Lodge, Lower Rochester Road. Aaron Nichols, Senior Planner, is going to present this application. So over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Chairperson. This is the site plan for the site, which shows the application site, which is Court Lodge, which is currently occupied by one house with a large area of garden around it, which has one garage located inside. The application site is located to the north of Wainscott and the A289 and to the south of Cliffe Road, and is accessed off of Lower Rochester Road. This slide shows the proposed site layout, showing the application site area in red and the wider area in blue, also in the applicant's ownership. The application seeks planning permission for the demolition of the existing garage to the south of Court Lodge and the construction of 8 houses comprising 5 3-beds, 2 4-beds, 1 5-bed, alongside associated works including the relocation of the vehicular access. This slide shows views from outside of the site along Lower Rochester Road. Currently, there are 2 vehicular accesses onto the site, shown in pictures 1 and pictures 3. The application proposes that both of these will be stopped up and a new vehicular access inserted in the area, shown in picture 4. Objections have been received in relation to transport concerns. A highway safety audit and a transport statement have been submitted along with the application, and highways have been consulted and have advised that given the number and the scale of the application, it is not considered the proposal would have a significant impact on the local highways network. This slide shows views from around the site. Pictures 1 shows the neighbouring properties at Soul Street Farm to the north of the site, whilst images 2 to 4 show views across the site, and picture 5 shows the garages to the south of Court Lodge, which is to be demolished, and picture 6 shows views from the west to the east of the site. This slide shows the proposed site layout in more detail. The scheme proposes a policy-compliant parking mix with electrical charge points provided for each of the proposed units. And with regards to garden sizes, all of the proposals provide adequate amenity space in line with the council's housing standards that state gardens should be 10 metres in depth. Objections have been received in relation to overlooking from neighbouring properties to the north. The proposal will feature an area of landscaping buffer which will be planted with native trees and hedgerows, and conditions have been provided to secure these. And it is therefore considered that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact on the amenity of residents of these properties. This slide shows the proposed elevations of the plots. The design and scale combined with the proposed materials will ensure that the proposals respect the rural character and appearance of the surrounding area. The proposed materials palettes include a mixture of brick types, timber weatherboarding, timber double glazed windows and doors, hung tiles, and a mix of slate roofs and Kent peg tiles, and a condition is recommended to secure these. This slide shows the proposed floor plans for plots 1 to 4 along with their front elevations. All would meet or exceed the minimum size requirements as set out in the national space standards. And this slide shows the proposed floor plans and front elevations for plots 5 to 8 along with the car barn associated with plot 8. And again, these would all meet or exceed the minimal size requirements as set out in the national described space standards. This slide shows sections across the site from east to west and then from west to east. And this slide shows sections across the site from south to north and then north to south. This application has been brought to committee as a result of the number of letters of objections received. And the application site is located in open countryside. And although the local plan seeks to prioritise development within the existing urban fabric, it is acknowledged that the local plan is of some age and the council does not have a 5-year land supply. The NPPF seeks to pursue sustainable development through its golden thread of developments, which the key elements are the economic, social and environmental impacts of the development. These are all set out in the report, and in conclusion, the development of the site is recommended for approval.
Thank you. I now move over to Councillor Williams as ward member. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for letting me speak on this item tonight. I'd like to raise the following objections to this planning application. With the proposed application being on a higher plane than the surrounding properties on Soul Street Farm, it would be in contravention of Medway Local Plan 203, Policy BNE2, which states, all developments should secure amenities of its future occupants and protect those amenities enjoyed by nearby and adjacent properties. Design and development should take regard to privacy, daylight, sunlight, activity levels and traffic generation. Also, in my opinion, 8 dwellings is an overdevelopment of this backland site. I have deep concerns of the impact of this development will have on the B2000, the junction with the slip road at A289. There's been a number of incidents at this junction with motorists turning right from the left-hand lane of the slip road round the back of the central reservations. Also has been doing U-turns in the Soul Street Farm driveway, causing a number of accidents, and the same could be happening with the new entrance. Proposed development put more traffic around this area and causing more unacceptable problems and a danger that already exists. In accordance to the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 111 states, development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there will be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or residual cumulative impacts on road network which would be severe. This application seeks to intensify the highway use at the B2000 A289 junction with the relocation of the access lowered to the junction for 8 additional dwellings and increases the severity of the cumulative impacts of the highway arrangements in this area. I really do have serious concerns about the effect this development will have on the safety of motorists on this part of the B2000. It also should be noted that the residents of Soul Street Farm and the management company are against this proposal. This committee should take into account the concerns of local residents and the effect of this unwanted development will have on them. I'd ask this committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Now open up to members. Any member? Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit that I looked at the table of the GIFA, the gross, gross internal floor areas, and I see the majority of those gross internal floor areas only just exceed the minimum requirement by 1 or 2 square metres, which means that they're just building the smallest houses that they can get away with it almost. 1 or 2 square metres meets the minimum, which then leads me to think that is this an overdevelopment? Because why are they just exceeding the minimum? So I'd just like some clarification that is it normal just to go over by 1 or 2 square metres when you're building houses and meet the minimum so you can get more and more houses on the space? Or do builders generally exceed that by quite a lot?
Aaron?
Thank you, Chairperson. I'd say it depends on a site-to-site basis. On some sites, they may meet the nationally set standards, as that is what is a national standard, what we adhere to, and anything that is above that is seen as a betterment.
Dave, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, Chair, I'm showing my age a little bit here.
The reason why the national space standards were brought in is because new dwellings were boxes, were very small, and you probably have all gone to show homes and you've seen gone up to bedrooms and you've seen a bed and you've thought, well, it looks fine, but where's the wardrobe? And so on. So that's why the national space standards were brought in, to make sure you actually did have the space within the property. So though it refers to minimum, it's still good.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to clarify something, I think some of the graphics contradict each other because can I just have clarification about how many junctions are going to be on this road? Because on some of the graphics it's 2, and then on other graphics it's 3. So would this be a 3rd junction on that road? Can I have clarification on that, please?
Aaron.
Thank you, Chairperson. In regards to access to Court Lodge, the two that are currently on site will be stopped up, and there will be one new one which is shown here, and that will be the only access into the site.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, did you want to come back?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. That's good to clarify that, because I was a bit concerned that it was becoming over-junctioned, if that's a word. I'm trying to think of, obviously with the representations that have been made, I'm trying to think of strong reasons for objection on this application. And I'm struggling to find a strong reason to object to it, a strong enough reason to object to it. And I think we have to take into account that there has been similar applications, particularly in my wards along Chartnell Street, where housing has been put in behind properties. And this is a similar application here, and that one was approved. I think the houses are quite attractive. There are elements to the application which I like, for example, with the integrated back boxes and B boxes and the rest of it, which is quite good. And as I've mentioned that before, that should be a standard across all applications. So appreciating the ward councillor and representations, I can't think of a strong enough reason to object to this. And I do go into these debates with an open mind and to look at things objectively. And I can't find something strong enough to object on this one, especially with the clarification on the junctions as well. I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Golvin.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I've got some sympathy for the local councillor, because yes, all developments like this, particularly in more rural areas, put a significant change to people. But I can't really see that we could turn this down. This very much reminds me of the development at the bottom of Ash Tree Lane and Pear Tree Lane by just opposite Luton Rec. Like there's been an attempt to make the homes fit in to a rural environment. I mean, there's a good attempt there to introduce a lot of Kentish vernacular, and I think from an architectural point of view, these look, yes, they may be small, but again, that development by Luton Rec, some of the cottages I think are quite small, which means they'll probably even be more affordable for our residents here in Medway, because we haven't exactly got an over-affluent population here in Medway. So I think on balance this is a good development, but I do understand and I sympathise with people living nearby, because this will dramatically change their asset. But in all honesty, that is not sufficient reason to turn something down. So I will be supporting this.
Any other member? Councillor Peake.
Sorry, I'm repeating, but it does need to be emphasised that when we're on planning, it has to be on planning basis. So I do agree with Councillor Pearce and Councillor Galvin. Whilst it's true that we should listen to residents, it's called democracy, but that doesn't tell us how we decide on planning. You can't turn something down just because you don't like it or we want to keep somewhere rural. It has to be on a planning basis, and I cannot see a planning basis to turn it down. There's been many times I've supported an application when I haven't liked it. It is part of the dilemma of being on planning.
Thank you. Just to ask Dave Harris, wasn't it against one of the policies it could be seen as?
Chair, I think it comes down to how old our local plan is, and you could argue that it's contrary to, as a report sets out, policy BNE 25. You could argue it's contrary to part of that, but then you bring in, as Aaron quite well, or very well articulated in the report and in his presentation, the policies which seek to restrict housing supply. Because we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply, because our local plan is so out of date, because we fail our housing delivery test, those policies cannot be considered, and therefore we're considering it against the national planning policy framework. And again, as Aaron says, that's is it sustainable development in terms of social, economic and environmental? And he talked through those, and the key one here is the environmental. And I think members picked up on this in terms of how sensitively it has been planned and laid out, which reflects that rural character and what is surrounding there in relation to Soul Street Farm and Court Lodge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, personally, I've been sort of in two minds of this application, but to me, it is overdevelopment of the area. It is a land designated as an area of local landscape importance, and the overlooking as well. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. Does any other member want to come back on that? No. I'll now hand over to Vice Chair Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Chair, before I move the recommendations, just to briefly correct the reference in the report to Finsbury Parish Council, I believe should be Finsbury Extra Parish Council. Unfortunately, Councillor Etheridge isn't here to hear me say that. So, recommendation approval with conditions 1 to 22 as set out in the report. I so move.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Those for?
That's 12, Chair.
Those against?
That's 2, Chair.
Thank you. The application is approved. Item 8, application for... oh, sorry, we need to wait for Councillor Etheridge to come back and take his seat, please. Right. Item 8 on the agenda, planning application for land adjoining Terrance Butler Avenue. Peter Hockney, Service Manager, is going to present this application. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to land adjoining Terrance Butler Avenue off St Anthony's Way. You can see the application site outlined in red there. With the access along Terrance Butler Avenue, which is a private road that then runs into the site and serves the drive-through McDonald's and petrol filling station to the north. To the south of the site and to the west is the remaining part of the Medway City industrial estate. To the north of the site is Vanguard Way, and as I mentioned, the petrol filling station and the McDonald's are located to the west of the site. There's development in this location, which is warehousing that's recently been constructed following a permission in 2019. As I say, for this development here, and that's quite relevant in the consideration of this application, to my mind as well. To the immediate east of the site is Whitewall Creek, which is a a tidal creek that flows into the River Medway, just off to the right-hand side of the slide there. And the river itself is approximately 480 metres away from the boundary of the site. The application is a resubmission of a previous application submitted in 2022, and that was refused on a number of grounds. Now, these are set out in full on page 107 of the agenda, which I'm sure members will have read in detail. And this is the first three relate to essentially the sort of pseudo highway aspects of the proposal in terms of the access for pedestrians to and from the site, an issue with the internal road layout, and the conflict between those aspects of the existing uses and those proposed, and an issue with the transport assessment, traffic generation, and trip modelling. And those were the first three reasons. The fourth one related to the location of the wastewater treatment plant, which is over on the northern side of Vanguard Way. The fifth reason related to inadequate information relating to archaeology, and the sixth one related to an insufficient flood risk assessment. Now, this application has been resubmitted with a suite of new documents and documents, reports, and plans to seek to overcome those reasons. And I'll try and refer back to those as I move through the presentation. In terms of the site itself, you'll see that it's currently allocated within the 2003 local plan as a park and ride site, and that's outlined in the principal element of the report. Here you can see some photographs across the site from Vanguard Way. You can see the new warehouse buildings which have been constructed in the rear of the photographs there. This is a photograph of the Terrance Butler Avenue with the McDonald's sign on the corner, and again looking the other way within this road, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a private road. Here's another photograph of the warehousing that's been constructed, and here you can see the block plan, which includes on the left-hand side the refused proposal, and on the right-hand side the current proposal. So you can see on the refused one there was no pedestrian access through to the site, and that was essentially reason for refusal one of the previous consent. The proposal here includes a crossing there that goes across the Terrance Butler Avenue with then a footpath which runs along the side of the site and into the commercial element for the car storage showroom aspect of the development. And that essentially deals with the first reason for refusal. The second reason for refusal, again, the internal road layout's been amended, and there's reference within the new documents to the guidance within Manual for Streets, and that's now been deemed to be acceptable in that regard. The third aspect in terms of the trip generation, there was updated traffic count data undertaken, and that has demonstrated that the current traffic levels are in fact lower than those that were previously calculated on the 2015 levels. So with those reduced traffic numbers, then the functioning of the junction, particularly between Terrance Butler Avenue and Anthony's Way, the results are that junction is an acceptable junction in terms of its capacity and its functionality. The fourth and fifth essentially were the aspects of wastewater and treatment plant and archaeological aspects which have been dealt with. And then the last one, which again for members tonight is again a key consideration. You can see the site here on the left-hand slide outlined in red, and its corresponding layout here with the car storage showroom aspect here and the Costa Coffee drive-through aspect here. The dark blue is flood zone 3 and therefore is at highest risk of flooding. The light blue is flood zone 2, so still at risk of flooding, but not to the severity and the frequency of the flood zone 3. Now the key aspects with this, and it's something that we've considered very carefully, because you'll note from both the report and from the supplementary agenda that has been published today, that the Environment Agency do object on flood risk grounds, and that's essentially to do with the development within the flood zone 3. Now, the plan itself, the Environment Agency plans are not the clearest, because they deal with the sort of generalities of flood risk. But you can see that in terms of the most at-risk areas, it's essentially the periphery of the site, which is why a lot of the development has been pulled away from the edge of the site boundary. It also allows for an ecological buffer zone to be included within this area to the edge of the site. Now, officers of the council met with Environment Agency officers to discuss the concerns that they had as part of this application, to sort of try and understand the concerns, really, because there wasn't an objection in principle to the 2022 application. As I say, there was no objection in principle to the fact that it was partly on flood zone 3, and nor was there an objection to this warehouse development in here in 2019, where some of the developments in flood zone 2 that you can see with the light blue here, and the northern part of this warehouse is within flood zone 3. So it was trying to establish the reasoning behind that, to ensure that we as the local planning authority are delivering consistent planning decisions, particularly in relation to the 2022 permission. So with that in mind, we looked at the site, looked at how far it was pulled from the boundary in terms of keeping it away from the areas most at risk, and indeed seeking other potential remedies that we can have. One of those is the new recommended condition 30, which is on the supplementary agenda, which ensures that we have control on the land level changes, any retaining features, and that those are essentially done to ensure that not only is the development protected, but that the flood risk elsewhere isn't increased demonstrably. In this case, as I say, the conclusion of that, to officers' mind, is that the development as submitted with those conditions is acceptable. And as members will know, the council has its own flood officer, and she is quite satisfied with this proposal and doesn't object to the application. So I think that combined with the wording within the Environment Agency's own objection, where the Environment Agency within their response state that the impact is likely to be negligible, and that turn of phrase and that considered wording combined with our own flood officer's view means that the recommendation that we're seeking as set out in the supplementary agenda is that as a result of the Environment Agency objection, we would have to refer this to the Secretary of State to ascertain as to whether they wish to call the application in. So the recommendation is to refer to the Secretary of State and, if not called in, to proceed to approve with conditions as set out on the papers and the additional condition in the supplementary agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, and apologies. I think I might have needed to declare an interest on this application because the local planning authority has consulted Gravesham Borough Council and Tunbridge and Morling Borough Councils. They've both sent in no objections, but Gravesham is my employer. So I'd need to declare that. And also, just can I have it clarified to me if I need to leave the debate or if I can still partake in the debate and vote? Thank you.
I think it will probably depend on which part of the Gravesham Borough Council that you actually worked with. If you were working in the planning department or any related departments that relate to be impacted by the development proposed, then.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's not the planning department, it's the environmental enforcement department.
Chair, if I can just clarify for Councillor Pearce, provided you were not involved in the decision-making of Gravesham Borough Council in terms of them making no comments, I had no part of their debate or discussion on it, you're okay, as Joe has said.
Yeah, just to clarify, that is the case. I've had no involvement in their representation to this.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Councillor Hackwell?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I agree with Peter that looking at the Environmental Agency's map, it's like pixelated. It's very hard to tell what is really in flood zone 2 and flood zone 3, etc. It's not a very accurate map. Interesting to note the whole of the waste sewage area, the other side of the tunnel, is completely in flood zone 3. So we have set precedents in the past to build structures in that flood zone, and also noting that what Peter said that about the flood zones in the warehousing down here are in flood zone 2. You can see it's covered in flood zones 2. So with I actually like the process that the applicant has gone away and looked at all the reasons for refusal and try to mitigate against that, and in officers' opinions, has done a good job. So I'm happy to support this application tonight.
Any other member? Councillor Brown.
I have just one quick question, and I thank the officers for taking the time and diligence for the work that they're doing with the Environment Agency. But my question is, has there been a change of policy with the Environment Agency that has prompted this unresolved objection of theirs? Because as far as I can see, we've been consistent in our planning, and they've been reasonably consistent in the fact that they are not, that they have a policy that says that unless they really have to make an intervention on floods, they won't. And I'm just wondering if there was a change of plan, if they said that they were objecting because they had changed a policy recently. Because if they have, that might just give us a steer.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. That wasn't articulated to us during the meeting. And I think, in addition, in terms of the categorisation of flood risk development contained within the MPPF, that has not changed in the intervening period either. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Hammond-Shea.
Thank you. And just for me, just one point of clarification. I think you mentioned that our actual flood officer has stated that they have no real concerns and they're happy to back this. Is there any reason why I can't find it in the supplementary agenda or in any other supportive information? Is there any reason for that practice? Or is it might be there, I just haven't seen it.
Peter, did you want to come back first? Or Dave?
Chair, the planning report here is effectively done on my behalf as Chief Planning Officer, so therefore I'm incorporating all the comments from within my team. So the flood officer is within my team, so the report effectively covers her comments as well.
Okay,
thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Any other member? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Howard said, I think this is a very good example of where a prospective developer has gone away and rethought things and taken, the council's recommendations to heart and come back with a sensible proposal. But also, I think it's worth making a comment that this is the last bit of the Medway City estate that has not yet been built on. So I think that's perhaps a remarkable milestone in showing the success of the Medway City estate in providing employment here in Medway. And I just hope that the coffee shop and the car sales are as successful as the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? No, I'll now move over to Vice Chair, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Land adjoining Terrance Butler Avenue off Anthony's Way, Medway City Estate, Rochester. I move the recommendations, which are recommendation A, refer the application to the Secretary of State under the Town and Country Planning Consultation England Direction 2024. B, approval with conditions 1 to 30 as set out in the report and the supplementary agenda. I so move, Chair.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those for?
That's 14, Chair.
Those against? The application is approved. Moving on to item 9 on the agenda, planning application. Oh, sorry, we're just going to take a short break. Sorry, I'm losing the plot here. Yes, moving on to item 9. Can those members who declared an interest now leave? Thank you. If you can please leave the rooms, we can't carry on until you've left. Councillor Hackwell. Right, moving on to item 9 on the agenda, planning application for 308 Hempstead Road. Jonathan Simon is going to present this application, so over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good evening, members. So this is an application on 308 Hempstead Road. The application is for roof alterations from a hip to gable ends, together with the construction of a dormer and roof lights to the rear to facilitate habitable accommodation within the loft space. And here you can see where the site is located in red. Here is the front and rear views of the property, and you can see the two adjacent properties. And whilst it's not that clear in the photos because the properties are set back at different different levels of setback, they are broadly similar in height as it currently stands. These are the existing elevations. And you've got the existing floor plans here. We then move on to the proposed elevations, and as part of the proposals, the ridge height will increase by approximately 2 metres. It is acknowledged that this is significant. However, when viewed in the context of the street scene, this will not be incongruous, which I will come on to shortly. The front, as you can see, retains the gable design that exists in the existing property, and as a result, it would appear similar, albeit with the height increase. The rear dormer that you can see here is modest in size, which is not dominant, and then you can also see the roof lights as well. And then there's an additional window on this south elevation, which a condition is proposed for it to be obscure glazed and non-opening. Here you can see the proposed floor plans. As part of the proposals, what is currently bedroom 4 here is to be removed, to be replaced with a staircase to access the loft, which contains the new master bedroom. It's considered that this is an improvement to the amenity of the occupiers, as the bedroom removed is below the space standards for a single bedroom and is less than 6 metres squared, and the new proposed bedroom is far in excess of the standards for a double bedroom at over 20 metres squared. And here you can see photos of the street scene. You can see 308 Hempstead Road is this property here. And as you go along, you can see how the properties differ in height as we go along the road. Then you can see here, this is a panoramic street scene from Google Maps, so you can just sort of see it all in one image. Then we have here nearby at 326 Hempstead Road, which is then shown within the street scene. This was given permission under an appeal and then subsequently amended at a later date to demolish the bungalow and construct a 2-storey house. And this house is approximately 0.5 metres taller than what would be as part of the proposals in front of you. And then just to end again on the proposed elevations, and just to clarify, this application is in front of members today because the applicant is a ward councillor. There has been no objections, and the application is recommended for approval as set out. Thank you.
Right, now open up to members. Any member? Okay, so now move. Oh, did you want to go, Councillor Peake? Oh. So I'll now move over to Councillor Jones, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. With regard to agenda item 9 on tonight's agenda, recommend approval as set out in the report.
Is that seconded? Seconded. Thank you. Those for?
That's 13, Chair.
Thank you. The application is approved. Right, thank you. Before we end the meeting, I'd just like to remind members that on Saturday the 15th at 10:30 we have the Port Marina site visit. Thank you. So thank you, officers and members. That is now the end of tonight's Planning Committee meeting.